Hello, welcome to episode 1 of It's All Happening. In this episode, I interview my friend Lara Berge about her experience moving to Paris and then moving to Lisbon from Australia. She covers all the challenges that she faced, how she got a job, and how she made the decision to move from Paris to Lisbon. We cover off on any tips for people that want to move overseas, and it's a really interesting discussion. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, Lara. Thank you for taking the time today.
Hi, Isaac. It's my pleasure.
Could you give us a bit of a background about where you're from and where you are now?
So I'm originally from Brizzy. I was born in Sydney, but grew up most of my life in Brisbane. And now I'm based in Lisbon in Portugal. But before then, about 2 years ago now, I moved from Brisbane to Paris, which was the first time that I ever moved out of home. And I decided to do it on the other side of the world. But it's one of the best decisions that I've ever made.
Yeah, how did you come up with the idea to move to Paris 2 years ago?
I mean, it's something that we were speaking about before the recording of this thing of like everyone has, I think, these ideas or things that they want to do that they think about like almost on a daily basis, or you've had this idea of an intention, something you want to do for years. For me, it was moving and living in France for a period of time. Because my dad is from New Caledonia, which for anyone who doesn't know is a little French Polynesian island next to Australia. Mum's Aussie. I have a lot of French family that I grew up around in Brisbane. So I sort of always grew up around like French culture, but I was completely socialized in Australia. And even though it was like 50% of my heritage, I still felt very Australian. And I got a French passport thanks to Dad. So I was like, I may as well use
Cheers,
it.
Dad.
Yep, thanks, Dad. And so yeah, basically the idea of living in France was something that I had in my mind, honestly, since I was probably in primary school. I think like ever since I knew that going on exchange was a thing. Basically, it was COVID during the time that I was able to go on exchange in my degree, which meant that I couldn't do it in the traditional way. But I sort of because it was this thing that I'd had in my mind for so long. I remember when COVID struck, I was like, oh, it's fine. Like I'll find another way to go. Like I was just so confident that I would get it done because I wanted to so badly. So yeah, that is why France for me. That's where it started anyway.
Yeah, that's great. Where there's a will, there's a way. Did you go on with the intention of it just being 6 months, like just being like an exchange period?
Yeah, so when I left, I basically was like, okay, basically for context, I'd been in San Francisco the year that I moved. I think, yeah, I was there in January. I was there for about a month on basically like a short-term uni exchange. And that honestly was really like a Kickstarter for me to be like, okay, I love this overseas adventure moment and I really want to continue it. And in mind, I had to go. I was like, I'll go in semester 2 this year. I'll do uni online because after COVID, that was one of the good things that came out of it, is that as a business student who really doesn't need to be in class in person, we had our courses online. But basically, I got back from San Francisco and I was like, okay, I need to leave immediately because coming back to Brisbane after being in Silicon Valley just wasn't where I wanted to be at the time, even though so many amazing parts to it. Obviously, it was like that phase of my life where, yeah, I really wanted to get back to being in adventure mode. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just move now, even though it's like mid-semester. I don't know if next semester my university will suddenly be like, okay, everyone has to come back in person now. It was my last year of uni. I didn't tell uni that I was leaving because I knew that they wouldn't allow it. But I was like, I don't care if my classes are at 2 a.m. in the morning, Paris time. I'm just going to go now. And I was lucky that my parents were super supportive of that. And I honestly do think that that was like a big factor in me just having faith that it would all work out. They were really encouraging of being like, just go now. It's never going to be the perfect timing, etc. So yeah, I basically just left 6 weeks after I landed, booked my one-way flight, and stayed with family at the start, which was, I was super lucky that I sort of had that base to go off. And yeah, that's where it all started.
Exciting. And then Was there a point where you were like, okay, I guess I'm gonna stay now? Was there like a big point where you were in your mind intention, like your first intention was to go home then, and then you
Yeah.
made like a conscious decision to, I know that year also you would have maybe applied to Australian grad roles and stuff, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. You're bang on there. I already had a grad role when I left, which was really good
Mm-hmm.
because I basically left in like April 2023, and I had
Yeah.
a grad role already signed for
Mm-hmm.
like February 2024. But when I left, I was like, okay, I'm going over for like 6 to 12 months. I have
Mm-hmm.
this safety net of like I can come back to Sydney and land in this role, but I'm also open to things happening while I'm over. Um, I was also still applying for like other grad roles. Yeah, again at like 4 a.m. Paris time, doing like 3 hour long interviews, which was pretty rough
That's
while
rough.
I was in Paris. But yeah, I was still at the start, I was really still wanting to like keep my options open. But to answer your question of do I remember a time where I was like, okay, no, I'm staying? I think there were multiple moments like that.
Yeah.
But honestly, they came pretty quickly. Like I remember getting to Paris and just being like, oh my God, there's so much to do here. Like it really did feel like a new world was like opened up in front of me, as cliche as it sounds. It's exactly how it felt. And I remember the first couple of people that I met in Paris, like French friends, they were all like late 20s and still studying, like doing their
Yeah.
masters, because it's a really common thing in Europe. Like people study until they're much older, compared to, yeah, I think a lot of Aussies, especially in business, like we're less likely to need to have to do masters and further study after bachelor's. So yeah, I remember going over and honestly within my first couple of weeks being like starting to look at research whether I could do a master's in France as a way to stay there. But then
Yeah.
sort of quickly realized like, no, actually 5 years of my honors study in Australia is enough study and I didn't want to go back to
Yeah.
studying. So I was like, okay, I will find a job here instead. At the time, it was an internship that I was looking for. But yeah, I remember that moment of like looking for masters, honestly, within my first couple of weeks. I think you also probably get a perspective of timing. And I think I realized quite quickly that, okay, if I only stayed here for 6 months, it's probably like a period of time where you just start to have your way about things and, you know, have like a friend group and people that you start to know. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking like that's just going to feel way too early to leave. And then I remember thinking, okay, 12 months is probably going to feel similar. Like it's probably the time where you really just start to feel, yeah, like actually quite settled and you have a routine and then you leave.
Did you try to push back the start date of your grad role?
I did. Yeah, I pushed it back once. Yeah, I remember the moment of being like, no, I'm not going back and like canceling the
Yeah.
safety net. As you say, being like a little bit scary because I didn't have a job in Paris yet when I cancelled my Sydney safety net. But I sort of
Yeah,
also
right.
knew that like with it, you know, if the safety net was going to stay there, then I sort of needed like that, I don't know, the extra push to make something work in Paris.
That was great to know. So you burnt all the bridges behind you and just like soldiered on. How was that process of finding a job in Paris? Because you
So
ended
hard.
up getting an internship, right, or a job in Paris. Once you'd lived there, you had the 6 months exchange, and then
Yeah.
you started looking for a job after that. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess to be specific, it wasn't an exchange that I was doing. It was like I call it my
DIY.
DIY exchange. But I think that's
Yeah.
like important to note because I think that if someone sort of, I don't know, gave me the permission or like told me that, you know, doing like a DIY exchange and you don't have to like stay within the lines of having an opportunity to go over, like you can just go over and do it. Even if,
Yeah.
like I was saying before, I didn't know whether my uni was going to turn around in 3 months and be like, oh, everyone has to be in person now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was like a key thing that I wish more people knew is like you can just go now and figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
And in terms of your question of finding work in Paris, I basically at the very start of my experience was, and actually before I left, I started interviewing for an internship with Adidas in Switzerland. Literally just
Mm-hmm.
knew a friend of a friend who had done the internship in Germany, and I was like, okay, another Aussie's done it. Like, I can reach out to him and sort of hear more about it, like get advice on interviewing, etc. So that's what I did. And I remember being in Morton Island, like on a big like uni trip that was just sort of like a weekend of camping and partying on the beach, and literally being like in the sticks and in the sand dunes, like on my phone praying that I had reception, trying to do like a phone interview with this recruiter from Adidas in Switzerland before I left, and just being like, well, this feels very surreal. Long story short, I basically didn't get that job. And then a couple of weeks later, I got an email being like, oh, actually, we want to push you through to the next round. So I worked pretty hard to, like, you know, put a lot of effort into that interview. I ended up getting offered the position, and it was like such a hard decision at the time. But I actually ended up turning it down because I wanted to stay in Paris. I didn't want to be in this like sleepy village in Switzerland in winter. And so I said no, and was like, okay, if I found something that quote unquote easily in Switzerland, then surely I'll be able to do the same in Paris, sort of like this blind confidence, which I think you need at the start. Turns out it wasn't that easy in Paris. And I ended up working bar jobs while I was waiting to finish studying to be able to get a full-time role. Because long story short, and I wish that someone had told me this before I moved to Paris, in France, the way that internships work is that you have to have what they call a convention de stage, which basically is like a legal document between you, your, school, like your business school, and the company. And it basically means that if you don't go to a French business school, you can't really do an internship for a company. I really wish that I
barrier
knew
to entry
before I left. Yeah. So that is one thing that I discovered pretty quickly about internships in France. The other thing I discovered pretty quickly is that you are not paid like you're paid in Australia generally, like in terms of generally speaking French salaries, but even more so, an internship salary is much, much, much less.
It's
Like,
not like prorated.
No, you can't really live out of home on an internship salary, especially not in Paris. So that's something else that I found out pretty quickly. And my like safety net of living with family was sort of running out. And it was also like quite far out of Paris. So it wasn't really an option to do an internship.
Yeah, like what was some of the most challenging parts of that move to Paris? Like finding a job, what were some other parts you found challenging once you got there? How did you make friends as well? Like, was that challenging? Like, where did you start? Was it people you already knew, or did you build completely from zero?
There's so many things within that. In terms of challenging things, like there are a lot of challenging parts, but to focus on the friends part first, basically when I arrived, I knew absolutely no one, and you have to just like clutch onto any sort of like lukewarm lead that you have. And so for me, what it was like literally someone that I had met, shout out to Michaela, a couple of months before, and we'd lived together in San Francisco. She literally had a French exchange student from 9 years earlier who had come and lived with her family, and now he lived in Paris. And she like connected us before I moved, and he was just really sweet in being like, recommending me like what phone plan I could buy before coming over, and like what were good areas, and like how to find apartments. And yeah, he was just really good with that. I think he had been on exchange himself in Canada, so I think when you meet people who've like been in your position, where you're moving to a country where you know no one, I think they're like always extra helpful. And so, yeah, I basically met him for dinner, and he was like literally the first person that I knew in Paris. He introduced me to some of his friends, again, like him having been in my position before. He was super generous and like connecting me with other people and like bringing me along to parties and stuff like that. So yeah, he was really my first friend in Paris. And then from there, in how I met other people was I had this really random job when I first moved over. I was basically filming videos of fashionably dressed women in the street, but like literally going up to them in my second language when I just arrived in France and I was like not confident in French at all. Imagine like a little Australian girl coming up to like this fashionably dressed woman in the streets of Paris being like, hey, your outfit's really cool. Can I please film like a
That's
quick
fully
1 minute
unhinged.
video of you? It's unhinged and so much rejection therapy involved in that. But basically, I was getting paid like quite well to do these videos for a friend that was
Yeah.
starting like a fashion social media page in
Yeah.
Australia. And he needed people around the world filming these videos. I was the person doing it in Paris. And honestly, there was, some girls that I would film and we would sort of get chatting. And there was this one girl who was like, oh, let's go for coffee sometime. And I was like, actually, yes, I know no one here and have no friends, so that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you just kind of built from there, I guess.
There are so many random places that I met people, but with that girl, there's like a story of literally we were like organized to get a drink together and she ghosted me. Like I got friend ghosted. Forget about dating ghosted. I got friend ghosted. She literally just didn't show up. So that was definitely, in the building friends part, like there were challenges like that. But yeah, there were people that I would meet like just at a climbing gym, like other people who were traveling, and then you would organize to like go to a museum together the next day or stuff like that. Also Australian connections who like were in doing exchange in Paris.
We've done challenges. I guess I'd really love to know what's like one story or exciting experience that you've had that you just felt like, wow, like this was so worth it. Like I'm so happy that I've done this.
There were so many. And I think that for me, it didn't come as like this one, big pivotal moment that necessarily stands out in my memory when you ask me that question. But it's more so like lots of little moments of either being like, I've just popped out of my apartment and I like go to get my bike to ride to work and there's snow on it. And it's like this little moment of being a reminder of like, I'm in Paris on the other side of the world. This is so cool. Obviously, the travel opportunities, like Paris is a really good city to be based out of, to be able to travel a lot, whether it's like taking the trains to other places around France. Like I did road trips to Italy, and there are like so many beautiful mountains around as well that are pretty accessible. I think, yeah, a lot of those travel moments were definitely oh my God, I'm so glad I did this moment. Also, the little moments that you are able to do something that you sort of thought was impossible at another period of time, like getting a job was one. I found that a really challenging process and it took me like 3 months to get a job in Paris, whereas I found the experience to be much like easier and quicker in Australia. And so I think when I finally got a job, I was like, hell yeah, I did it. And that makes it all worth it.
I guess getting a job would have been a huge breakthrough moment after not finding it really challenging.
Yeah, that was definitely a huge breakthrough moment. Like it was really a moment of being like, okay, if I don't find a job in like X number of days, I have to go back to Australia. So that was a big relief when I did.
If someone wants to move to Paris, what advice would you give them? Let's stick to, I guess, what 3 pieces of advice would you give them?
I think the first one I would say is write down your intentions of what you want from your experience before you leave. I remember doing this and it helped me during the experience because each time you sort of have like conflicting priorities of like where to spend your time, or it helped me with decision making to sort of align me to be like, okay, this is why I'm here. Like for me, my priorities were like, I want to get fluent in French. I want to have this adventure and sort of live things outside of, that are different to where I've grown up and meet people. I want to really challenge myself. And it also helped me to, at the end of my experience, look back at that list and be like, okay, I've sort of ticked everything off and I'm ready to move on, which helped me to like make the, I was going to say difficult, but it actually wasn't that difficult decision to move to Portugal once I was done in Paris. It was difficult to leave like the connections that I'd made in Paris because I think when you're away from home, like I think as anyone who has been away from home before knows, like the people that you meet sort of end up becoming your family because you're so far away from your real family. So they were hard to leave. But I guess knowing that I'd left friends from Australia to Paris, I was like, okay, I can still keep the relation going from Lisbon to Paris with a much smaller time difference. So yeah, I think my first piece of advice is to write down your intentions. My second piece of advice for someone who wants to move to Paris is start applying for apartments now. Because they're really difficult to find, but it's not impossible. And if you can find someone who has done it before, I would really recommend reaching out to them, because there are a lot of like French specific sort of rules and laws around apartment hunting. If anyone is actually in that position, they're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I would love to share with them all the things that I learned over a long period of time that I wish someone had told me earlier. And then the third thing that I would recommend for someone moving to Paris is really try, I think everyone will say this no matter the location, but really try to sort of make friends with people, make friends with the locals. I think that you would have like a very different experience moving to Paris and just staying in the international community, which I definitely lent on while I was there. Like most of my close friends were not from Paris, but I think it's still a really valuable part of the experience to be meeting locals and seeing that part of a city.
And at some point, you moved to Lisbon. How did that come about? And how did you come to the decision? And how have you been finding it?
I've been loving it so far. How I came to the decision was I was in Paris for almost a year and a half. I sort of ticked off everything in my list, all the reasons that I wanted to move there. And I also quickly discovered that I really loved being in my DIY exchange mode in Paris, but I liked a lot less my daily routine once I'd sort of started real life in Paris. And I define real life as like full-time working. Yeah, I wasn't enjoying my job that much. And my boyfriend, who I met in Paris, was thinking about moving to Lisbon. And I'd never stepped foot in Portugal in my life at that point. But I remember just thinking, okay, Parisian winter is really hard. I don't know if I could do another one of these. Lisbon sounds, it was just one of the cities where anyone, I don't know if you had the same thing, Isaac, but everyone that I spoke to who'd been to Lisbon always just said like it was amazing. And so
I've heard that as well.
Yeah, honestly, I was like, fuck it. I'm keen to be in adventure mode again. I realized that I really enjoyed that period of being like new in a city because there's everything to discover. And I was ready to have that again. And so, yeah, I was basically like, what the hell? I'll just try. I'll just apply for jobs and maybe it won't happen. And maybe I'm meant to stay in Paris, but I'll just try. And I ended up finding a really cool program that I would recommend to anyone who has a European passport. It's called the VIE program, and it is hosted by Business France, and they basically allow any person any European under the age of, I think it's like 30, to go and work for a French company, but overseas. So they have, if you go into like the VIE website, they literally have thousands of jobs in like all different industries all around the world listed. And so I found this job in Lisbon working for a French fintech company, but it was like on the US market, in customer success, which was like a role that I'd been interested in for like years. And I remember seeing it and being like, okay, I am getting this job. Like I'm going full shark mode. And I think that's probably the advantages of not finding finding it very difficult to find work in Paris, is that I had applied for over 50 jobs. I had done so many interviews, and honestly, that practice just made me like very comfortable with the interview process. And I honestly think that's probably what allowed me to really just lock in and be like, I am getting this job. So it was the only job well, actually, no, it wasn't the only job that I applied for in Lisbon. I think it was like the second that I'd applied for in Lisbon. And then I ended up getting that role. And then, yeah, once I got the offer, I was like, hell yeah, let's give it a go. Let's move to Portugal, because when else in my life would I be able to do this? And yeah, I think
It's
it's
so
so
true.
perfect where you like, I remember thinking, 60 or 70-year-old Lara is going to be like, remember that time that I lived in Portugal? And if it's one of
Yeah.
those opportunities for me, that's something where I'm like, it's definitely worth doing if it's an adventure that you can sort of tell your grandkids about. That's how I like to pivot my life decisions from at the
Yeah,
moment.
me too. Yeah, you always think if you were to write like an autobiography, like what would be the most interesting story? And
Yeah.
yeah, moving abroad definitely, makes things a lot more exciting. The rapid kind of experiences, I know from speaking to friends, you're just experiencing life at a quicker pace because you're experiencing more new things. So
Yeah.
you're genuinely just making like living more life because you're making more memories and putting yourself through like more challenges to like develop yourself. It's kind of like a hack to be able to live more life in a shorter period of time.
100%. Yeah. Like the fluctuations in emotions and like just everything is more like up and down, the extremes more extreme. But that's exactly what I wanted. Like, it's why I wanted to move. I remember moving over and being like, I just want to be challenged. Like, I want to move to Paris because I just want to throw myself in the deep end. And once I was there, I was like, get me the fuck out of the deep end. Like, this is too hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really worth it. And I would 100% recommend it to anyone. Like, definitely one of the best life decisions I've ever made.
Well, thank you. I think we'll just end on that note. Thanks for taking the time today, Lara, and really appreciate it. You have been building a community as well, for people that want to move overseas.
Yeah.
Do you want to touch on that and where people might be able to find it?
I have been writing about everything we've spoken about today. So if someone's in a position of, like you're saying, wanting to move abroad or wanting to hear more about what my experience was like in Paris or Lisbon, or I also interview others who've made the decision to move abroad in a somewhat unconventional way, to sort of share their stories. They can find it on Why Not Now Stories on Instagram. And I've also just started publishing on Substack as well, which is under my name, Lara Berge. And yeah.
Awesome, Lara. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Isaac.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Next week, we're going to be covering how to make a decision on what to do in your 20s, because I think this is a common problem that a lot of people come up against. So tune in next Tuesday when it's posted.